So, welcome back. As you can see, we have Wayne McRoy with us, and our subject today will be nanotechnology and nanorobotics. So, Wayne, um, especially when it comes to neural nanorobotics, that is let's say, a field between um, nano technology, neuroscience, and robotics.
Right? It's called biodigital convergence.
Mm,
That's they oftentimes term this as. So this biodigital convergence that's going on, it's a combination of different sciences together using cybernetics principles in order to engineer something new. So the nanotechnology itself plays a lot into this, and it has everything to do with controlling the mind or trying to affect the human mind in certain ways, especially as it pertains to the human brain and its function. So they have tried their very best to leverage a lot of these principles to bring this into being because this is all part of the transhumanist future that they have in mind for us. So we see this biodigital convergence going on. And there are other terms that they use to describe some of these things. And of course, the nano neural robotic pathways and stuff are one of the important aspects to this, but they also utilize other things than what people might think. When people are thinking about nanorobotics, they're thinking about something that's primarily maybe a little tiny machine swimming around in the human body. It goes way beyond that. They've actually hijacked the biological mechanisms of action in the genetic type sequence of people and stuff like that too in order to engineer new conditions and new traits. And they've also used frequencies. So a lot of what's being go like rolled out right now, as far as putting in place the new 6G infrastructure, which President Trump just signed an executive order funding that very heavily, this all plays its part with it. Now, 5G was an important aspect of the rollout for this, but 6G is going to be even more so, and they're still working on 10G systems as well right now. But they're going to largely roll out these 6G systems, which will have the data capacities that go way beyond 5G at this point, and that's what they need in order to implement this. So what they're trying to implement is a little sub science called digital biology. And most people aren't even aware that this is a real thing or that it exists, but it most certainly does. And this all ties to nanoscale things as well. And when we're talking about the nanoscale, that's a very, very small scale of operation. So you're talking, it's a billionth of a meter when you're talking about what a nanometer is. So it's very, very tiny. And there are actually smaller units that they use smaller than nanotech, and they've gotten way beyond nanotech within the auspices of the black budget community of the military industrial complex, where they're working on pico technology and stuff like that too, which is a much smaller technology than nanotechnology. You're talking down to like atomic level and molecular level as far as the size scale with that. So they can engineer a lot of these things, and most people are hard pressed to consider that this technology already exists and has been used in some ways, or that they, a lot of people, especially in the conspiracy culture, will outright deny the existence of nanotechnology. They'll say there's no such thing and it's just there to try to leverage the idea as fear against the people. Well, there most certainly are demonstrable sciences that relate to nanotechnologies, and many of these things have been developed, and there are heavy funds going into it through the auspices of DARPA and other agencies as well. So they're developing these technologies, and they have been developing them, and they've rolled them out en masse in some very real ways that most people aren't comfortable talking about. And one way in which they've rolled out nanotechnology on a grand scale is through the COVID shots. Now, I know a lot of people have seen some of the stories that came out surrounding this about how they contain graphene and stuff like that, and that's all part and parcel of what's going on with these mass scale programs that they're rolling out. And certainly these are real commodities that do exist, and you could find all kinds of documentation of nanotechnologies and nano devices and things like this. And it is one of the ways in which they're going to eventually network everybody's consciousness, I guess you could say, this is what they're trying to do anyway. I don't think consciousness could be squared away as a simply biological feature, but they're trying to attach people's biology directly to the Internet of Things, or a specific subset of the Internet of Things called the Internet of Thoughts. And that's going to be being rolled out here in the very near future as well publicly. There's already white papers and stuff that exist on this, and the World Economic Forum a couple of years back put out a research paper called "The Internet of Bodies is Here," and certainly that's part and parcel of this too. So this is why you have people like RFK out there pushing wearables, like devices that will monitor your health conditions in real time and be able to transmit that data via your cell phone to wherever, and they're collecting all that data. Well, this is the next step. This is actually getting devices, micro-sized devices within people that network all this information together and are able to transmit it. And we've seen an example of this with these COVID shots. If you've ever seen the stories of where people are saying that they're receiving a Bluetooth signal or something via the shots, have you seen any of that stuff talked about?
Mm-mm.
No? Well, this is something that went on, probably 2, 3 years ago now. People were discovering this, where if and I forget who it was that did the testing on this, but they took these people who had received these shots out like in the middle of the woods where there's no cell service, there's no nothing out there, and they were able to pick up Bluetooth signals from the people that were vaccinated, and it comes up with an IP address on there for these people, and the only thing they could factor it to is the shots, something in the shots where it's actually generating this. So this has been a large scale story that's been going on for a long time, but it's kind of been hidden from the mainstream. So it's been noticed that people are actually transmitting a signal from within their body now with some of these COVID shots. This is part of the networking process. So there's ways to do this. I'm trying to think. It's been a while since I looked at this, but there were some researchers out there who told you how to find this. You have to go into your phone settings and set it back into developer mode or something like that to activate it, and it'll scan networks like local networks. And you could pick up these networks on there. And there was no other plausible explanation for this other than they were coming from within the people's bodies. And it was only happening because they tested those that were vaccinated and those who weren't vaccinated. And it was only happening with vaccinated people. So these signals are going on. And then you might remember early on in the COVID shot rollout, there were people talking about how they were able to stick something magnetic to their arm where their shot was. This is all part of it too. So you're talking about these are real commodities that have been observed and documented here by real researchers, not necessarily uh, university tied researchers, but independent researchers with real credibility were doing these studies. And they found that largely this was happening in a subset of people. So there's real world data to go with this. So there's evidence in play that perhaps some nanotechnologies of sorts have already been rolled out, and the presence of graphene is a known commodity in these COVID shots now. So it's definitely there. It's been documented. And what's it there for? That's the other big question.
Yeah, so my question would be if that is, or if that was in every shot, because we know that when you look at the website, How Bad Is My Batch, that we had certain shots that had a very, very high mortality rate, and then others where, yeah, not practically nothing much was happening. So I wonder up to this day if people all got the same thing. It doesn't appear so. And would that, of course, then begs the question, is everybody now having a Bluetooth signal or not? And if not, how did they pick the people, or was it just willy-nilly?
Right, that's the question we all have, and I don't necessarily have the answers to that, but there were different batches that
Mm,
seem to have had different contents in them than some of the others. And of course, if you're running a massive experiment like the COVID shots were and still are, you have to have some type of control group, don't you? And you'll notice they didn't do a control group. Like they didn't, or at least on the public face of it, they claim they didn't do a control group and give people saline or something like that in its stead. But most certainly, I think that in some way, shape, or form, they ran some type of a control group as well. And that's why sometimes you have people who have deleterious effects from these shots, and sometimes some people don't seem to have any effect. And they say, I'm fine, I had it and I'm fine. Well, did you get the real thing, or did you get the full dose, or did you get the actual mRNA technology they're talking about, or did you get something else with it? And there were certain batches that had the more efficacious mRNA sequences and stuff in them, and there are certain batches that had the graphene in them, and certain batches that didn't. So you have all of these different things, and they identify them by lot numbers. And there have been insiders who have come out and claimed that certain lot numbers are worse than others or have certain things in them that others don't. So it's hard to know what's true and what's false with this, but certainly a lot of these things have been documented. And I would say, just on the basis of what I know about scientific experimentation, you certainly do have to have some type of a control group if you're going to measure the actual effects of what's going on with this stuff, especially if you're rolling mass like this. So it seems like that's what they did. So they had certain batches that were much worse than others, or had certain different experimental things in them that others didn't. And a lot of it has to do, in my view, with tying people to this neural nano network that they most certainly want to develop. So we've seen people come down with neurological symptoms after some of these COVID shots as well as other cardio symptoms and things like that as well that have been documented. And it's really beginning to come to a head now. And that's the whole thing. Like, you look around at society and culture, and we're really seeing the onset of a lot of new conditions that never existed in the past that are coming out, medical conditions that could, if you are intellectually honest, be tied back to the rollout of these shots. But of course, mainstream academia is not being genuine about their approach to this. They're disingenuous about it. They're not being intellectually honest about it and connecting the dots back to this, because they've been so indoctrinated into thinking that all vaccination is good. And we still see that across the board today. But there are certain things that are attached, especially in these COVID shots, that I think have more to do with setting up this network than other aspects of it and angles to it. So this, in my view, is probably the real reason that they wanted to roll out mass vaccination like that. Not so much because there's some deadly disease or something out there. They don't care about that. They really don't care about your health. What they care about is control. So that's essentially what they're looking to do. So they rolled out the vaccine, and they used the pandemic situation as an excuse to do so. So that
and
was always the end goal with it.
yeah. So, do you have, could you give an example of a condition that didn't exist before?
Well, certainly you see people talking about what they call VAIDS, vaccine acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and
Mm,
become a real thing. There's a lot of different other conditions that have really been on the uptick here that have just come around since that time. I'm hard pressed to think of something specific off the top of my head, but I know I've seen a lot of news stories where people are coming down with some of these strange symptoms that have never really been present before, or the existence of some new type of a phenomenon, or the uptick in some type of a medical condition that was hardly a thing before. Like, for instance, one thing I've noticed that I've seen is a lot of people now have what they call fatty liver disease, just seemingly inexplicably. People that don't drink, people that don't have like any of those predispositions to that. But this is something that's been on the uptick lately too. So I know a lot of people personally that have come down with this now, what they
mm.
call fatty liver disease, and for some reason their levels and stuff with their liver are elevated, and they have symptoms and stuff as a result of that, and they have no explicable reason as to why all of a sudden they have this condition. And I'm talking young healthy people like in their early 30s.
Mm.
that don't drink, don't smoke, don't do any of that stuff. So, like, this is one thing I could think of as an example of something that's been on the uptick. And what's the connection? What's the correlation? I don't know. I can't say for sure what the correlation is, but it has arisen around that time frame of the mass
Yeah.
rollout of these vaccinations. So there's a time limiting constraint right there that you could look at and connect the dots in your head and say, hey, maybe there's a correlation. Maybe we should look into that. But like I said, the mainstream academia is not being intellectually honest about it, and they're not going to look at that. And they refuse to. And that's a lot of the reason why they save face for themselves, because they say, oh, well, there's no studies to show that. Well, of course there's not, because you're not doing them. That's the whole reason. Like, that you're not doing the studies, and anybody that does independently do the studies, you try to marginalize and write off as being inaccurate science or junk science or something like that. But you do have independent researchers that are finding all kinds of connections back to these COVID shots for things, and they're not really talked about in the mainstream medical community or in the mainstream press. But certainly, in my view, I think it's all part and parcel of this same thing going on. It's all about the rollout of these nanotechnologies. And actually, technically, if you want to get down to the brass tacks, mRNA technology is a nanotechnology in and of itself, and it is being utilized and rolled out across the board. And they are starting to develop new vaccines and stuff around this. Like, they just came out with a new Lyme's disease vaccine that they're experimenting with. And there's supposedly all these different cancer vaccines and stuff they're working on. We'll see what happens with all of that, but I think it's more of the same. I think this is more of a vector point for infecting people with the nanotech that they need people infected with, which, by the way, can be affected by frequencies, thus the importance of the 6G network and all of that. So we have all of these connections, and then tie in the concept that RFK is talking about, wearables and stuff like that, technologies that could track and monitor your health condition in real time and send that information to your cell phone. You're talking about the next level of that, wherein it's not just a read type function. They're not just reading that information. Okay,
Mm.
this is what I'm talking about. This is why the invasiveness of nanotechnology, because not only can they read that information, your biological information, they can affect it from outside. It's a send and receive signal. It works two ways. It's a two-way communication. It's dual use. So they could utilize that to implement changes within your body and do certain things and cause people to change their behavior, cause certain people to maybe have the onset of symptoms or illnesses or to duplicate illnesses. They could do this. That's what I said. This is a whole realm of science called digital biology that most people are largely unaware of. And it's simply through changing the frequency they can affect people in this way. And this is a known commodity. They've done studies on this, military studies going back to the 1950s and 1940s. They did one project called Project Pandora that was all about how frequencies, microwave frequencies and stuff, could affect behavior in people. And not just behavior, but the physical well being of people. So they've known this for a long time, and they could do that without having a nano network within somebody at that point already. But add to it now this nano network that's going into people's biology, and it's like an antenna or a relay station from one to the other. It just amplifies the signal all the more and makes it more readily available for manipulation in that way. So what they could do then is they could generate like different symptoms in people or behavior changes in people simply by hitting them with a modulated frequency. Thus, the importance of the setup of the 5G network and having all of these transmitters and relay stations and stuff everywhere, because 5G operates on millimeter waves, which are a much smaller waveform than previous cell networks. And 6G is going to take that to the next level because it could transmit energy levels that are much higher than 5G can. But that's why this was one of their major pushes during the whole COVID scamdemic they pulled. You'll notice they were all about only essential workers can be out. Well, who was out in mass during that time? Well, the cell phone companies setting up this 5G infrastructure all through that time. And that's why, because it has to do with the implementation of this digital biology. So there's a lot that exists that most people are totally unaware of as far as in the scientific mainstream of things, going to the military projects with this and how it's being manipulated in this way. So these nanotechnologies, in my view, are one of the important facets of setting up this panopticon network that they want to have in place over the course of the next coming years here. So we're seeing that rolling out around us, and they've transformed the entire medical system and medical community to bring this into being. And you'll notice if you've been to the doctors lately, everything is digitized now. Everything's a digital record. They hardly keep any paper records anymore. Everything goes and is attached to your file, even to the point where if you have medical testing, they'll send you your results. You could see it right in your chart on your cell phone or something. Like immediately, almost immediately, as soon as they get the results, you could see that in your chart. And if you think you're the only one with access to that, I think you're sorely mistaken.
Um, when you talked about these wearables and monitoring your blood pressure, heartbeat, whatever it might be, that reminded me of a an episode of Stargate SG-1. And in that episode, the crew was on a different planet. It was the Tolans. They had contact before, a very highly developed, technologically developed, yeah, species, let's say. And there was a mysterious death of one of the leaders. And so the crew talked to one of his friends, and then they asked, isn't it possible that he had some failure, maybe heart attack or whatever? And then he said, no, because all our vital signs are monitored around the clock, and if anything is not as it should be, a medical team will arrive at your place immediately. And I heard that and I thought, oh, that is so creepy. I mean, yeah, they sold it as this great progress, and nothing unexpected ever happens to you. The medical team will rush in right away. But when I think about the implications of that, I found it creepy.
Oh, most certainly. And that actually relates to some real world events right now. Look
Hmm.
at the NASA program, the moonshot program they just did. Well, these four astronauts that supposedly went up there and just circled the moon and should be back later today, should be arriving back on Earth later today. Well, they actually, for the first time ever, they took with them a science experiment, which is actually their immune system on a computer chip, where they took some of their bone marrow and their genetic material for each one and put it on a computer chip so that they could monitor the real world effects of space on human biology in that kind of a way. So I don't know if you heard about that or not, but that's been something that I've seen around the mainstream news relating to this as one of the scientific innovations going on with this whole moon program right now. So that's interesting. It ties over to that same type of modality there that you're talking about, monitoring your health in real time to see what's happening. And then, of course, the medical team will arrive certainly right then and there if should you need. I mean, that gets more towards the science fiction end of things, sure, right now. But science fiction of yesterday is science fact today. So we have all of that being just programmed into the human mind through the entertainment culture right now as an acceptance of some of these invasive things that go on. So you could see how it's hearkening towards that. And of course, they always will use these positive type images to promote their ideas when it doesn't have anything to do with your health whatsoever. It's more about control.
Hmm.
It's control for these people that want to control everything. They don't care about your health. And of course, they'll sell it to you as this could be good for your health. You see, if you have a problem, we can help you instantaneously. We could monitor what's going on in real time and get that back on track really quickly. So, yeah, I mean, there's some good uses for this type of technology for sure. The problem is the people that are in charge of developing it right now don't have the best interests of the masses in mind. They have their own greedy perspectives in mind with this stuff. And the benefits of these technologies aren't for the regular people. It's only for the select few of these international elites, as they like to call themselves. And it's for their benefit only, not for the rest of us. So, all the innovations they promise with the use of these transhumanist technologies, they're not going to come to fruition for the average person. It's
Hmm.
all a lie, it's all deception. They only intend to use the benefits of it for themselves. And the rest of us, they intend to use it as an enslaving tool. So that's certainly what we see here. And of course, it all has to do with networking the human being into the greater panopticon control grid. It's all about this collectivism at the end of the day, this development of the hive mind mentality, attaching the human being to this greater neural network. That's where it's all leading to. So the use of these nanotechnologies transcends just the normal thought process of people. Like when they're thinking about nanorobots, they're thinking of something largely mechanical. That's not what it is at all. It crosses the bounds of all different scientific disciplines, and that's why I said it's called biodigital convergence. It's combining digital technologies with actual biological technologies where they can manipulate your genetic functions and your DNA and all of these different things to build certain systems within you that attach to these nano networks, and they use substances like graphene to bridge the gap in that way. And they understand certain precepts of biology at the highest most levels. Most of us don't, and especially those in mainstream academia. Because when you consider, if you go back and you look at the different models of medicine that we've been handed, now the primary model that most of what our technologies today are based on is called germ theory. And germ theory has its merits and it has its flaws. The other side of the argument that's come to light recently is called terrain theory, which seems to also have some truths, but it also has some flaws. Well, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, wherein one precept of terrain theory that I think holds true, that I've seen demonstrably seems to hold true, is that sometimes these microorganisms or bacteria or things of that nature are pleomorphic, whereas in they could change their shape or modality based upon exterior things happening, exterior um, precepts or something happening, external values that change the shape or structure of the bacteria. So these pleomorphic bacteria could be affected by frequency. So therefore, they could hit a certain bacteria or something with a frequency and change it, transform it, transmute it into a totally different bacteria. And therefore, sometimes they can implement the causation of symptoms by doing that. So, this is something that is more largely attached to terrain theory than germ theory, but I think it's something that could be demonstrated, and bridging the gap between the two is part of the function of this digital biology thing that they're going through, and they're actually putting a lot of money into right now, so that they could understand that if you hit it with a certain frequency, it can fundamentally change its shape, and it's almost speciesization of what type of bacteria it is. So pleomorphic changes within the cell structures within the human body can cause changes as well. So this changes even things like gene expression. They could use this same type of modality to change gene expression in people. So they could alter your DNA through the use of frequency. That's why I said the importance on all of this ties back to the infrastructure being set up for the 5G network and now the coming 6G network. It all ties together because this is what these people developing these things have in mind. They could effectuate changes within the body from an external network through the use of frequency. And I know it sounds like a bridge too far and sounds ridiculous for most people to consider, but look into it. Don't believe what I'm telling you about it. Go ahead, look into it. Look into the mainstream scientific journals and stuff. They'll tell you all about this stuff. It really exists. It's a real thing, digital biology, and it is the cutting edge here in the future. So they can effectuate all kinds of changes through the use of these technologies, and actually having the nano networks in place within people's physical biology helps to make this a lot more practical and easier for them to pull off. So, in my view, I think that's what's really largely going on here.
Mm. Um, I looked at nanorobotics that can navigate, for instance, through the cerebral vascular system to deliver therapeutics, let's say a brain tumor. And but what I have seen is that they are still working with the same old nonsense like chemotherapy. Yeah, it's just that the it is called doxorubicin, and then this tiny little robot, for lack of a better word, is putting this yeah so-called medicine into the tumor, and then I looked up the yeah symptoms, that you can have after getting that particular medicine. And it is severe fatigue, hair loss, nausea, and potentially long-term heart damage.
Sounds like long COVID syndrome, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. So, and the problem that I have at that particular point is if you use this highly developed technology, why not go all the way and ditch the stupid chemotherapies as well?
Because money. That's why. It's an entire industry built around it. I'm not kidding either. That's
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me.
You know exactly what you mean. No, it doesn't make sense. If they have all these cutting edge tools and they could do this, they could do targeted delivery of therapeutics to the cells in particular that are causing the problem, and just take out those cells and not affect the healthy cells. Why don't they do that? Well, it's because there's an entire industry, multi-billion dollar industry that's been built around cancer and chemotherapy and all of this stuff. It's all part of the medical model. And that's why right now they're in the process of transforming the entire medical model. Because right now it's about symptom management. That's what they do with our modern medical models that we have today. They just manage symptoms and keep the gravy train rolling, because they don't ever look for what's actually causing the problem. How do we address that and solve that? You see, a patient cured is a customer lost within the modern medical system that we have right now. So what they're doing is they're pivoting now, and they're trying to transform the medical model from this symptom management model to what they call a human augmentation model, whereas in they will use these different technologies to augment people, for lack of better terminology. It's leaning towards the transhumanist phase of things, and they're trying to monetize that whole prospect here as well and turn that into the next level, so that they could ostensibly do away with all these different illnesses and even down to the effects of aging and stuff like that preemptively, if you could pay enough money to do that. See, that's what it's all about. It's all about being lucrative in the process of doing this. So they're trying to switch up the medical model into that type of augmentation model. And of course, they try to use all the different justifications that they can to do so. They set up all these ethics committees and stuff like that and say things like, well, if somebody who, say, is paralyzed from the waist down could benefit from some type of a technology or an implant or something, a nano device or a neuro device that can be implanted that could allow them to walk again and perhaps even give them superhuman strength, then doesn't it benefit the average person to have access to these technologies too and maybe be able to opt in? You see how it turns from, okay, we could help somebody who's disabled to have normal function back and perhaps go beyond normal level human function in that way, to now, well, since we could do that for the disabled person, shouldn't we be able to do that for everyone? Isn't it ethical to do that for everyone, to offer that service to everyone? That's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to use all of these different new tools and technologies they have to transform the medical system into this augmentation system, which is a slippery slope down the road of transhumanism, which is exactly where that all leads. So that's what they're attempting to do through this. And with that being the case, yeah, it doesn't make sense right now. Well, if you could do this stuff, then why do we still have things like chemotherapy and all of this? Well, it's going to be a gradual process because there's too much money to be made by these greedy corporations that are controlling the development of these technologies. And when you understand that what we see in the public mainstream right now as the state of the art is actually bare minimum 30 to 50 years old already within the auspices of the military industrial complex, black budget programs, and special access programs. So they likely have stuff that is far in advance of that already, but hasn't been rolled out on a massive scale yet because of the effects it would have on the economic systems. And these people that control and steer these technological developments always have that in back of mind, because if they lose control of the development of these in the public domain, then they lose control of their economic grip on their power in this world. And they don't want to do that. So they want to maintain as much control as they can, and they want to benefit from it as much as they can through the rollout of this. And that's why you have a lot of these tight knit little groups that control the release of these different technologies through the course of time. So this is what I see happening, and that's why I see it happening how it is. There's a lot of people making a lot of money on the current medical system, and they're not ready to give up that money and that power just yet. So they're going to start trying to slowly trickle this stuff in. You could cross the bounds from the medical system and from these nanotechnology developments to other things as well. Like look at the oil industry, for example, and look at the connection to the UFO releases and stuff that are supposedly going to be forthcoming. Well, all of this has to do with the development of free energy systems and propulsion systems that defy our standard physics. They can't release that stuff overnight because whole economies would collapse catastrophically overnight if we suddenly had access to free energy devices. These controllers of this world don't want that, and they won't allow that. So that's why it's always this slow trickling of these technologies into the mainstream paradigm. And it's the same thing with this medical model. But we're going to see some transformative things happening here in the very near future because the floodgates are about to break with all of this stuff, because there's too many people now that are interested enough in it and actually looking at it with an intellectually honest approach. And they're beginning to discover some things that have been long hidden from people. So all of this stuff's going to be hitting the public domain very soon, and it's just a matter of how they control the slow trickle in of this, because that's what they're attempting to do. But we'll
Mhm.
see what happens. I don't have the answers to all of that. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know from a lot of the white papers and stuff I've read about these things that they do like to control the slow implementation of this stuff into effect. And they've already come up with white papers talking about the transformation of the medical model and stuff as well. So there's real documentation of this. I'm not just making it up out of whole cloth. It's all out there for people to find if they just know where to look.
So, do you think that, I mean, I can understand if somebody says, hey, with this nanotechnology, I can walk again. I surely cannot blame that person if they want to walk again. Yeah. Um, but do you think that down the line, this will be only for the rich and famous?
That's my fear. They try to actually push it on the public as being for everybody. But if you know anything about these people in charge, you know that's never the case. They don't intend for the average person to be able to have this. I mean, look at some of the things they already have right now. Like you know as well as I do, that the quote unquote elites and the wealthy people of this world, they have access to different medical technologies and different doctors and stuff than we do. They have a different standard of healthcare than we do, right? Look at people like Henry Kissinger, lives well into his 90s. Like, look at some of these people. Look at their lifespans and their relative health, even into their older age at this point. They have access to things we don't. So that's my fear with a lot of this, is that the intention is not for the average person to be able to benefit from it. It's only for the rich elite, this breakaway civilization that's come into being around these different innovations, and they're only going to use it for themselves, for their own benefit, but they will sell it to the people as a potential benefit for them, just to get the approval for that and to actually get people working on it, useful idiots to actually put their brain power into it. That's how they view it. Okay. And that's the thing. They need us more than we need them. But they'll do everything in their power to make it look like they're on our side or it's for our benefit and we should be fully vested in this. But their intention is different from what they present it as.
So, in other words, they will sell it as, yeah, the great medical breakthrough, something that can radically change and lives for the better.
Yeah, and they've already
But
done this.
at the end of the process, um, the peasants only get the control grid,
Right,
and, and the benefits are for the rich and famous.
right. And you could look, they've already done this. And for proof of concept, all you have to do is look at the vaccination program. There's your proof of concept right there. They have always presented, especially in 20th century medicine, they tell you that vaccines are the bargain basement technology of the 20th century. They've saved countless millions upon millions of lives, and they've made life better for human beings all across the world just based upon this one technology. And they tell you that with zero evidence, except for contrived evidence where they give you numbers. They make up numbers out of whole cloth and hand them to you and say, this such and such a vaccine saved countless millions of lives, this many millions of lives over the courses of its development. And then they deny any ill effects that regular people get from these things, chronic illnesses, allergies, all of these things that have come to be thought of as standard regular life things that were never present in the past before mass vaccination programs. But they'll tell you that this is it. Like, this is the big technology that is life changing, that can alter human beings' perspectives and lifespans and stuff forever. And in the meantime, it's just making them chronically ill and medical patients for life. But they sell it as this is a great benefit for mankind. They're going to do the same thing with all of these transhumanist notions too. They'll tell you all these augmentation technologies will be great. They'll prolong your lifespan and this and that. But what they actually do is they siphon all your wealth off of you and transfer it to those elitists in charge. And they're the ones that truly benefit from medical advances rather than the rest of us.
How,
The elite take different vaccines than you and I do.
mm,
So just so you know,
how would they siphon off your wealth with that?
through the use of implementing chronic conditions on you, just like
Ah,
they do.
okay.
So this is what happens. I mean, so they give you, all right, we'll use a typical example here. We'll say you get a DTaP vaccine when you're a child. Okay, so now then through the course of the years, you develop allergies, eczema, autism, all of these different conditions that come into being, and then you are forever indebted to the medical system. You're always back and forth to the medical system to get treatment for these symptoms. So they write you a prescription for your eczema. They give you an inhaler for your asthma you have. They put you on certain psychedelic medications and stuff to help treat your autistic symptoms or whatever it may be, ADHD, whatever. And then those medications also cause side effects, and you need more medications and treatments to keep that going. So they build a customer for life. And through this, They siphon off your wealth because you're paying into the system to alleviate your symptoms that you have that are only present because they gave them to you in the form of the vaccine to begin with. It's an entire industry built around this. And this is what's going on right now in the world. And a lot of people in the mainstream medical system will outright deny this or say that that's an outrageous way of thinking. But it's absolutely true when you actually go and you research all of these different things. You find that that happens to be what goes on. And here in America, the number three cause of death in America is standard medical treatment. Number three cause of death. And I would say number one and number two are probably also related to the whole mass vaccination of populations and stuff like that as well, with the onset of all of these chronic conditions that come about in people. That combined with the things they're spraying us with in the air and the stuff they're putting in the food. By the way, the nanotech in the food, titanium dioxide particles in the food are a major problem, but most people are largely unaware that they're there. We have all of this stuff going on. It's a synergistic network of things that are making people unhealthy. And in so doing, they're creating these medical customers for life. So then you need treatment, and you go and say, you're sickly throughout the course of your life with all these different conditions or something like that. And then as you get a little bit older, you develop these cancers. And then cancer is one of the big ones that really dwindles people's wealth away in a big way because the treatments and the medications get so expensive and the insurance companies don't want to cover them. So then you wind up losing a lot of your accumulated wealth and assets through the course of your life. And the system just eats those up and they wind up going in the hands of billionaires instead. So this
Mm,
is the way in which the medical model reproduces itself through the course of time and how it siphons off the wealth and labor and energy of the people that it's supposed to be helping. This is what happens right now. And I know that's a very negative view to take on it, but that is most certainly how it occurs and how it goes on,
mm,
especially when you look at subsets of people that don't ascribe to our modern medical system. Groups like the Amish, who have very low rates of all of these chronic illnesses and stuff like that. And they don't participate in that system, and they usually live to a nice, ripe old age. So we have that going on. And then, like I said, there's this double standard. The elites and the wealthy of the world, they ascribe to totally different systems. They actually acquire the services of homeopaths and things like that, different doctors that use different practices in order to get their medical treatment. And I know this to be true. They have a different type of health care than you and I do. It's a different standard because they have the money to actually put into that, and they don't go to the same hospitals and medical organizations that you and I do. So you have that whole thing going on. It's a very two-sided operation. So they have a different standard of care than we have, and that's all by design because they want us engrafted into this system and they want us to believe that this medical system is for our benefit when in fact all it's there for is to siphon off our wealth and labor and ideas and to siphon that back into the other side where the wealthy and the elite benefit from it. So I
mm,
know that's a lot, and I know a lot of people might take umbrage with that viewpoint, but I find it to be largely true.
mm. But I think sometimes the elites gobble up their own propaganda. I give you one example. We have in the UK, among the royals, Prince Charles dying of cancer. We know that Catherine has been diagnosed with cancer. And of course, I do not have proof, but it falls in the time frame of shortly after the shots were rolled out. So, and my line of thought was, yeah, maybe they believed their own propaganda, and that is why they are in a bad place right now. And with Charles, I have to say, in the meantime, you can really see it. Yeah, that he is no King Charles. I still say Prince Charles. Yeah, but you know what I mean, yeah? So do you think that is possible? That they sometimes fall into their own trap?
Oh, I certainly think so. Yeah, sometimes they get so confident in the things that they've been had have had pushed on them that they buy their own propaganda, and sometimes that does happen. I would suspect, or sometimes there's other people behind the scenes, behind the veil of the throne, that maybe have different plans for figures like that. So maybe some nefarious stuff goes on there. There's always been this secret priest class that's ruled from behind the scenes. So, like your mainstream figureheads, like the king or the prince or the president, these people aren't necessarily the ones pulling off things like that. Maybe they think that they're getting the special shot that the rest of the people aren't, but somebody decided to pull the rug out from under them because they don't like how they're running the show or something. That kind of stuff happens too. All those kind of political intrigues from behind the scenes. It's all historically documented. All this stuff has happened in the past. It still happens today, no doubt. So I don't know. Sometimes maybe they do buy their own propaganda, or maybe sometimes they're led to believe that they're getting something different from everybody else, and they don't get something different than everybody else. And this only helps to uphold the illusion for the public, then, doesn't it? So it's all about maintaining their illusions and their grip on power. So certainly, I could see that happening.
Hmm. Okay. So we have reached the top of the hour, and we will go a little bit deeper into the transhumanist agenda, and we will see the patrons on the other side.